Hi, everybody. This week's lecture will be covering Chapter 7 of the ASP.NET MVC book. The book goes through a scenario of building a e-commerce store or a sports store. Um, since a majority of you have submitted design ideas for your final of building e-commerce sites, I'm going to kind of change up my lecture and not go so direct with the e-commerce store piece. I want you guys to experiment on your own about how you want to build your store. I don't want you to just kind of follow my lecture and just build what I'm building. So what I'm going to do is we're going to kind of go through the same steps as what's in Chapter 7, but more specifically, what I want to do is I want to take those concepts and apply them to a different product. So what I'm going to build, instead of building an e-commerce store, my plan is to actually build out a student registration website for students to be able to schedule for courses. So that's going to be the concept that I'm going to be using as I work through the remaining lectures. As you guys are building your projects, I'm going to be building this project, allowing you to view my process and the mechanics that are discussed in the textbook, but applied to a different scenario. So if you remember from the previous set of lectures, I had started an application. I had called it Week 4 MVC. I'm going to go ahead and actually continue building on this application, so that way you have kind of a baseline of where we're going, and you can kind of, again, we'll kind of evolve this product over time, and that way we're kind of working consistently out of the same project. So the first thing that I really want to kind of talk about is the pre-planning for this project, what we're going to be building. And to do that, I like to kind of just take a basic approach and use a Word document to kind of outline these ideas. Some people prefer to do a paper pencil, some people prefer to have elaborate tools. I find just sitting down and thinking through a scenario for about 5 or 10 minutes helps me kind of outline all of the things that I'm going to need to use and I'm going to need to build. So the approach that I normally take is I like to go through and kind of talk about use case scenarios. Who are my users? What things will they be interacting with? And the reason I do that is so I can identify what models or classes I need to create, what kind of data that I'm going to be moving in and out, and kind of start to consider the screens and the navigation that's going to be needed for the application itself. So this is going to be a student scheduler. And the scheduler is not going to be anything really sophisticated. We're not going to be actually negotiating schedules. We're just going to be going through and allowing students to make course requests. So thinking about use cases, those use cases will consist of the following. We'll have a student use case, and the students will be able to log in, maybe update profile information about themselves. And that profile information may be things like email address, phone number, password, and first name and last name. The second thing they'll be able to do is view a list of available courses or sections. And then they'll be able to add those courses / sections to a cart or a course selector. And then once they've added those, then they can finalize their selector and then get a printout of their sessions or sections. Alright, so that'll be the basic flow for a student. Then we're going to have a manager role, and that manager will be responsible for viewing students, and maybe they can see things like who has logged in, last date of login, the courses on the student selector, and then they can also manage courses, So they can add a course, they can modify course properties, and those things may be things like course number, name, teacher or instructor, meeting day, dates, meeting times, the occupancy of a course, and if it is active. They'll also be able to delete a course and manually register a student into a course. So those are kind of the simple use case scenarios that I'm foreseeing. A third scenario that we may have is the ability for a teacher to log in and actually view students who have signed up, and that may be at this point all that they have. So we'll kind of flesh that one out as we get into the product a little more. Alright, so that'll be kind of our scenario. Let me go ahead and we'll save this. Alright, now what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to kind of go down to a new page, and I want to talk about models or classes that I'm going to need for this project. So the models that I have in mind that I'm going to need to consider are basically the nouns that exist under the use case scenario. So what are the things that I'm talking about dealing or interacting with? I need to make sure that I have models or classes to actually engage and transfer and carry data for each one of those. So let's kind of go through the basics. So we have a student, we have a manager, we have a teacher. We're going to have a course, we're going to have a schedule. We will have a, and instead of calling it a schedule, I'm going to call it a course selector, and then we'll have a registration, which will be a record on the course selector. So I think those will be our basic models. Now obviously I may be missing something that's obvious, but as we build the application we may go, oh, we need an additional class for this or an additional class for that, and then we can just go ahead and create those classes as we go through the development process. So let's flesh out some of the properties that we'll need. So for a student we'll need basically all of these input fields. We'll probably also need address and city. We may need things like, or we'll just do address. And so the manager will probably have some similarities. We'll probably need first name, last name, email address, and phone number. The student will probably also need a password. And we'll need student ID. And teacher will need first name, last name, maybe a teacher ID to associate with the course, email address, and a phone again. Course will have course ID, name. Let's see what other details may we have. The teacher, the meeting dates, and I'm thinking of those as being like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Meeting time, occupancy, and active status, or like an is active. The course selector will have registrations, records, and then a registration record will consist of a student's ID, a course ID, and maybe just an is active, so is that registration still active? Alright, so those will be our models or our classes that we'll have for the application, and these are kind of our use cases. So that starts to give us an idea around what models we need. So the next phase kind of pre-planning is to start looking in greater detail at the navigation. How is the user going to navigate and move around? Now, we don't actually have to write that down. If you feel like it's valuable to you, you definitely are more than welcome to do that. But at minimum, I recommend if you're doing a use case, the use case usually gives you a pretty good bit of detail around what you need to do in terms of the navigation flow. So, for example, my user is going to log in. I need to incorporate the login in all user cases, and after they log in, then they'll be having the access to, update profile information or view available list of courses, finalize their course selector, and print out their selections. This is my basic navigation flow. Now, what I'm foreseeing is I'll probably need to build at least one, if not two controllers, probably a student controller or a registration controller and then a teacher's controller. And then I'll probably also need a manager's controller, or we may end up using what's called an area to do that, and we'll talk about that in later weeks. So I think for this particular first step, we'll probably focus on just implementing the student piece, and then we'll work on adding the additional components as we get there. So the student navigation will look something like what we have outlined here. So we'll need a login, we'll need a ability to update user profile, an area to list all of the courses or sections, and then the ability to finalize the course selector, and then have a screen that'll do kind of a screen dump or a print of those selections. So with each one of those steps, those kind of become our actions. And so inside of our controller, we'll have an action or a method for each one of these 5 bullets. And then from there, we'll have to create an associated view. So we'll go through and we'll build all of those pieces inside of our MVC application, and then we'll move to actually starting to code up some of these elements and getting those mechanics of the MVC app from the model to the controller to the view all in place in the next lecture.